here comes the throttle. Circuit breakers in. We have separation. Inboard and outboard, they're on. We're coming forward with the side stick. I've got a blowout. Vapor 3. Get your pitch to 0. Pitches out. I can't hold it altitude. Correction. Alpha 4 is off. Prep collecting emergently. Flight call. I can't hold it. She's breaking up. She's breaking.
Oh, there we go. Hey guys, good morning. This is a very impromptu thing. I want to talk about Turtle Boy has posted that Judge Bev Canone has affirmed that the 227 search for how long that died in the cold really did take place. Now, I have to say that by the end of this trial, the only people left who actually still think that Turtle Boy tells the truth will be those that actually call him daddy. I mean, because it's nuts. But let's go over the 227 and we're going to do this in a fair way. Okay. So that's not at all what the judge said. We have to go back and understand what was really going on here. Okay. In order, the motion to dismiss is based on an older case, which is called an Odell. And the idea is you have to show the judge that the grand jury was either shown false evidence or was not shown all of the evidence that the state had at hand in such a way that it would have changed the outcome of that grand jury's vote. So what the defense argued here was that the state actually had within their grasp the Celebrite report that showed the Google search for how long to die in the cold at 227, which is absurd. And that's all the judge really ruled on. The judge is not deciding whether that 227 search is real or not real. That's not something she would ever weigh in on. Okay. That's something that would be determined by competing experts at the trial. Just got a message. We have troubles. All right. So I guess this is not going through the Facebook, but that's it. You guys can still see it on Twitter. There's some kind of a issue with Facebook at the moment. But anyways, so the judge is not going to weigh in on 227. She's not a forensic data person. From the judge's perspective, you have two sides that have competing experts, and they will work out. Their experts will present to the jury at trial, and the jury will decide. Judge Canone, no judge is going to decide whether that 227 search was valid or not. So it's really absurd to say that. And I think Aiden is intelligent enough to know that. So he's really just lying to people, but maybe he's not smart enough. I don't know. Who knows? The judge is saying that the state could not have given the grand jury the 227 search because in 2022, when the grand jury took place, all the state had was 2022 software. They didn't have the 2023 software because they don't have a time machine. Okay. So Alan Jackson's argument was absurd. Alan Jackson knows it's absurd. And he probably knows that it had no chance of convincing the judge. And that's all the judge ruled, was that the state did not withhold any information from the defense. I'm sorry, from the grand jury. That's it. That's it. There's it's simply not true that the judge has affirmed that 227 happened. It's not even close to true. It's not even something that she would weigh in on. All right. So it's crazy to say that. And it's amazing that people can't think this through anymore. But I guess nothing really amazes me on that at this point, that people just don't seem to really be able to weigh evidence in any kind of a critical thinking kind of way. It's unbelievable because this is simple stuff. It doesn't really it's not rocket science just to figure this stuff out. So where are we on 227? Well, it is still interesting, right? If you just look at it standing back, not looking at the rest of the evidence of the case, you do have competing experts in theory, on both sides, right? So on the defendant, we have Rich Green, who doesn't seem to be any kind of an elite guy or anything like that. That's not really known. I was never able to find out what else, what other, if he had testified in any other cases or done any big cases or anything like that. He's an older guy in his 70s who just started doing this 20 years ago, but that doesn't mean he's incompetent or anything like that. He's just nobody special. He's the kind of guy that defense teams produce. And all he really did was just run the data through the software, and it produced that 227 timestamp for how long to die in the cold. And he reported it. That's it. He's just doing his job on that. Now, according to Alan Jackson, the FBI has someone. I don't know. Is it? Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that it might be an actual expert from Quantico that looked at this, and he says that they agree that the 227 search for how long that it took place. Now, we don't know that. We have not seen any report on that. All we have is that very brief description, and it wasn't a quote from Alan Jackson. And Alan Jackson is incredibly tricky with words. So nobody should be jumping to any conclusions on what the FBI report found until they actually see the report. But I would guess that the FBI, which does have skin in this game now, the feds have a stake in wanting to prove that Josh Levy did not take on this case, this investigation for corrupt reasons, or that he was duped. So the feds kind of have skin in this game. They're on Karen's side. That doesn't mean that their expert was wrong, but we haven't seen it, right? We also, my guess is that the feds just ran the 2023 version of Celebrate, just like Rich Green did, and it produced that timestamp. Now, whether the feds actually went into any deeper attempt to understand what was going on, I don't know. No, but obviously you would think that the FBI has some of the best forensic data people in the world. I'm sure they do. So for now, let's assume that some of those people looked at this. Okay. But on the other side, if there's anybody that could weigh in with more authority than the FBI on this, it would be the people that actually wrote and developed that software that was used to find that timestamp. And they have. And the senior expert, the guy who was described as writing the software, which probably means he's the guy that directed the team that wrote that software. His name is Ian Whiffen. It's Celebrate, I think, is a European company, and he is going to testify for the prosecution. And he put out a blog in late December that explained very clearly why that timestamp is not reliable, and that's why he's going to testify that the search in all likelihood took place at 6:23. So you're going to have some pretty highly esteemed experts in theory battle this out on both sides. So just looking at that from 10,000 miles up, you would, and which is what the judge would be doing, and what somebody outside of this case, maybe nationally taking a superficial look at this case would do. They would say, okay, you have two really elite experts on both sides that are going to debate this, and a jury will have to decide. So just from that view, you could take the position, okay, this is 50-50. Maybe 227 happened and maybe it didn't happen. I don't think that would be unreasonable to take that position. In which case, you have to look at all the other evidence. And that's where I was this summer once I started realizing that 227 was not a certainty, and then that it was very much uncertain. So I said, all right, now it's really time to dig deeper into all the other evidence to find, because we don't know if 227 happened or not. There's no question that if 227 did happen, if Jen McCabe did search for how long to die in the cold at 227, while supposedly unknown to her, her friend was out on the lawn doing just that. To me, there's no question that there would be a conspiracy, that there would be a cover up. The idea of her just randomly making that search without knowing what was going on with John would be preposterous. So to me, if you could prove definitively that 227 happened, yeah, there would be a conspiracy. But instead, what we have is the competing experts on both sides who dispute it. So whether more evidence will come in on this before trial, we don't know. But at this point, we'd have to look at this and say, just looking at that one piece of evidence, that it's something that's very, very much in dispute. Now, if it's in dispute, you can look at the other evidence, and there is kind of a proportional relationship here. So if Jen McCabe Googled at 227 how long to die in the cold, then it is equally true that the state police or somebody planted taillight pieces. All right, because there's no way those taillight pieces would be buried at the scene like that unless there's a conspiracy. And if Jen had made that search, then there's a conspiracy. But it works the other way too. If you can show that there was no way for taillight pieces to be planted, then you can look at 227 and say it simply didn't happen. So it has that kind of relationship. So to me, it's almost impossible that evidence was planted at that scene. I'm not going to go over it because we've gone over it so many times, but there was just no opportunity to tamper with Karen's vehicle. We know that this evidence is going to come out at trial and Karen's words herself that the taillight was shattered and pieces were removed from it that morning. Okay, and there was no opportunity to tamper with it earlier than that. Thank you, Skip. I appreciate it. Thank you, my man. There was no opportunity to tamper with it earlier, and there was no opportunity to bury it at the crime scene. The only time anybody could have had access to Karen's SUV was after it was towed. That was at 4:18, and it arrived sometime after 5. The main taillight at the Canton Police Department. The main taillight piece was found at 5:45. So the earliest, if everything went Mission Impossible well, that the trooper could have arrived at 34 Fairview to plant evidence, burying it in the snow, would have been being really generous. You'd say 5:20, maybe. By then, at that time, the state police CERT team was setting up, and the news trucks were there. There was a crowd of people there, and you can see from the video. There's a lot of vehicles there. So the idea of him walking in onto the middle of the crime scene and burying stuff deep in the snow is kind of absurd. So it's certainly highly, highly, highly improbable. So to me, the impossibility of or the near impossibility of planting taillight evidence is enough to show that 227 didn't happen. But it's definitely not the case that the judge has said that it happened. That's not even close to true. That's just another deception that Turtle Boy is giving you. And I know there's a lot of people out there that think he tells you the truth and they're loyal to him, but at some point, don't you start to question whether somebody's telling you the truth? When he told you back this summer that he never spoke to Karen's lawyers or to Karen, you can't now say you can't come out now and say, well, I had to protect my sources. No, you didn't have to lie. You could protect your sources without looking at your audience nightly and lying to them. So there's a credibility issue here. And at some point, I'm not trying to silence his reporting, but at some point, sensible people have to look at this and say, this guy doesn't tell us the truth because he doesn't. And that's just a reality of it. All right. And certainly, I would think by the end of this trial, there's going to be nobody left except for the diehard people that just will believe in Santa Claus. All right. So let's move on to that. There's only a few other issues that I want to go over with you today. The other thing is the craziness. Now, James, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Very much appreciate it. Thank you, guys. The absurdity of now these guys think, talking about Sean and his followers, the feds are still coming. They held back their information and they're going to swoop in like Batman at the end of the day, right before the trial. Why would they hold it back? Okay. Why at this point, 3 weeks away from the trial, they've dug as hard and they had incentive because right now the feds have egg on their face. Josh Levy has a lot of egg on his face. You could make an omelet. All right. Unless they could find that there actually was a cover up, then they wasted enormous federal resources and they acted very improperly the way they were working so closely with the defendants in a murder case, her lawyers, in a murder case that's ongoing. The way they interfered in a murder trial and could have jeopardized it and might have jeopardized it. There's a lot of egg on their face if they didn't find a conspiracy, and they didn't. There's no evidence that they did. The judge has read what they've turned over. Both sides have read what they've turned over, and nobody has cited anything any single piece of evidence that suggests it was a cover up. Yes, there are a couple of weird things, right? Messages and stuff like that, but nothing that suggests a cover up. And there's all anytime you dig deep into any human situation, any investigation, you're going to find some weird things. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. So, they didn't find anything. You don't hear you didn't see this, one of their last chances with Yannetti's sister. The judge said, "Okay, we're waiting. We're expecting you to file one more aspect of this motion to dismiss. You didn't come through with anything in the last hearing that suggested a conspiracy. This is your chance. And you said you were going to have a final argument here today on the motion to dismiss." And she just said, "Well, for strategic reasons, we're not going to do that." And then the judge replied to the written motion that they did send in, and she said there's an abundance of evidence here against the defendant. So she's not trying to prejudice anybody. She's saying there's plenty of reason to conclude that the grand jury made a rational decision based on the evidence that they were given. That's all she's saying. Um, so it's going to trial. And at this point, to believe that the feds are coming in, you might as well just believe Santa Claus is going to come down the chimney of the courthouse and rescue her. I mean, it's just at some point it becomes a religious belief, and it's not even rational anymore. And I don't really know why. This is not part of some personal war. When I know the damage that's being done to these families, and I look at the stuff that Sean is saying that never comes true, and it seems more and more absurd. And just recently doubled down on the idea that Paul O'Keefe was part of the conspiracy and possibly Carl Dougal, John's best friend. How is he getting away with saying this stuff and people think that it's serious? And why would anybody take anything he says seriously? To me, this stuff is so crazy that if he told me the Celtics won last night, I wouldn't believe it. I nothing he says. It's deep it's so deep into delusion that I don't really understand it anymore, and I feel bad. I feel like there's a real tragic end that's going to come here, and I don't want to see that. I mean, it's time to come clean. It's time to let the daylight in and say, all right, what I've been saying is not true. I've given you really bad analysis on this. I've been duped by Karen Reed, who he communicates with regularly over the encryption app Signal. I've never used an encryption app. All right. So I don't communicate with anyone over an encryption app. I got nothing to hide. I have no secret messages. Uh, and anybody I talk to and have talked to since day one on either side, I tell them right away, I'm not on anybody's side. I'm objective. I'm just going to look at the truth and do my best to analyze the truth, and that's it. I'm not on anybody's side. Now, do I feel sympathy for the victims? Yes, but only after I analyzed the evidence for months and concluded that a conspiracy was extremely unlikely. And once you do that and you look at, and then you start to get to know a little bit the people on that side who've been being falsely accused, and you do feel sympathy for them because their lives are destroyed, and you only hope that they can bounce back from it. Their kids have to be escorted to school and escorted within classes and stuff like that. I mean, it's just the level of damage that is done by this woman's false accusation and the people that spread it for her. It's not a game. It's not a game. There are innocent people, including children that are in school, that are suffering and being given tremendous damage for this. But that doesn't mean I won't look at the evidence in a I will always look at the evidence in an objective way. So it starts with the evidence, but then some of the emotion that comes out is feeling bad for the victims because of what's going on. So the idea that the feds are sitting on all this, why would they? Why would they want to do that? It doesn't. No one even argues that, right? So Sean never has to explain any of his reasons behind anything. He just throws stuff out there. So you could say, like, why would the conspirators need this guy to remove their taillight? How would that help further the conspiracy? He doesn't have to explain it. Chain of evidence. Why would Proctor delete videos of Karen coming home when you couldn't see her taillight when she was coming home? She pulled into the garage front ways. There's not even, from that angle, there's not even a glimpse like you saw when she pulled out because it was the right side taillight. So but they don't have to ever explain anything. The same thing, Melanie Little, I saw her the other night. She's like, oh, it could have been Proctor. Doesn't anybody say, well, Melanie, Why? How would that benefit Proctor? How would that benefit the conspiracy for Proctor to delete that video? No one asked, right? And they don't have to explain. That's what drives me crazy about this case. You ask them simple, essential questions like that, and they don't feel they have to explain it. They can just say, "What odd things?" And you ask the question instead of answer it, they just point to some other thing. Oh, well, Trooper Proctor wore glasses on Sunday and had a drink. I mean, listen, answer the essential questions. All right. There are foundational questions that go to the heart of the case that show whether a conspiracy was possible or it was not possible. And those are the questions you have to start with. And if there are things that can't be answered, then you have to call that a dead end. So if you can't explain why Proctor might have deleted that video, you have to abandon that because it doesn't make sense. All right. If you can't explain why removing the taillight and getting some Canton cop to do it, how that somehow furthers the conspiracy, you have to let it go because it doesn't make sense. It's not part of some coherent theory. And that was where I was this summer when I more was open to the theory. I was trying to make it all add up and make sense. And I couldn't, and it didn't. And that was I talked to Sean every other day on the phone about it. And there was no way to make it add up. And he would put stuff out there like that. I'm like, yeah, but it has to make sense. But it doesn't to him. It doesn't. It just has enough. You just line up enough weird things and you say, but aha, it drives me crazy. But this is how people not being able to use critical thinking like that is destructive. It's destructive to innocent people, and it spreads. Listen, I believe that there are a lot of corrupt cops in the world. There's a lot of corruption that goes on, and that's maybe even part of my incentive. That's what interests me, right? And but it doesn't mean it happens in every case, and you have to look at the actual evidence. All right, and if you make a mistake, you don't first of all, I advised Sean back at the end of the summer. I was like, listen, leave yourself an escape route here. In fact, what I told him was he was talking about his team. I didn't know who his team was, but he was saying that he has a team of people. I said, well, that's good. You know, you guys are ex law enforcement or whatever is on your team. Save your credibility for other cases. Don't leave yourself no way out on this case. Don't back yourself into a corner. Have an exit strategy. And he ignored my advice on that. He left himself no way out, and that's where we are now. He has no way out. He has no credible way out. Neither does Turtle Boy. They have no way out. They can't because the accusations they were made were so powerful and so damaging to innocent people. How can you ever recover from that? How can your credibility ever recover from that? There's no way after that that you can just say like Sean might say, like, take the L. But how can you take the L? How can you take the L if you've been sitting there and saying the feds are going to arrest everybody, all the McAlberts on February 15th or whatever date, there's many dates that was predicted. And then it never happens. And then the U.S. attorney tells their lawyers, no, they're not targets of the investigation. Taking the L means more than just saying you gave wrong analysis. Because of the extreme nature of their accusations, it means that you participated in cruelty, extreme cruelty against innocent people. And it's very hard to live with yourself after that. So it's hard to really take the L. And I think that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing people doubling down on weirder and weirder theories. I mean, I think he posted last night something about, uh, you know, uh, Auntie Bev being involved in this, the judge. So she's aware that the feds found evidence of a massive cover up, but that she's waiting until the last moment, or she's trying to force someone else. I don't know. It's nothing. It's not rational. This is going to trial. It's not. There's no way to make sense of this stuff in their arguments, and that's just the truth. And I know we live in an age when people really buy into some theory that they've seen a lot of evidence for on the internet, and they invest a lot of emotion into that theory. And so much invotion it becomes part of their identity. How many people out there for their profile picture they have free Karen Reed? This is part of their identity. So people that are like that, there's no way that they can just give up the ghost on this theory. They can't. So, and as you get closer to trial, and I predicted this a long time ago, you're going to get weirder and weirder theories. And what are they going to say when it goes to? So Sean's now saying he's still saying there won't be a trial. What's he going to say when the trial begins? Do you think he's just going to say, you know what, guys, my analysis has been bad, and That's it. I'm retiring. You guys should not be listening to me because my analysis has been terrible. No, he's not going to say that. He's going to come down with some new theory. What's he going to say when it goes into deliberation? What's he going to say if the jury comes out and says Karen's guilty? What's he going to say if Karen works out a plea deal? He's not going to come out and say, well, sorry, guys, I gave you some wrong analysis. He's going to give you some other weird conspiracy theory that they forced Karen, very similar to the Delphi murders where Richard Allen confessed to his wife over the prison phone, and that's admissible. And his defense lawyers are trying to say the guards were part of an Odinist cult and they forced him to do it. You're going to get weirder and weirder and weirder theories. And for that, but the core group of people that follow this is really going to shrink after the trial. So you're going to have a core group of people that just will believe anything at that point. And those people just don't want to give up this theory. And so they're the ones that'll still be following Sean and still be following Turtle Boy. And those are people you can't reach those people. There's no amount of logic or evidence that can ever reach those people. That's it. They believe what they believe, and you can't change it. So now another interesting thing I wanted to talk about is the location of John's body, where it was found, because this is if we're trying to understand what happened, because if the state does not have a convincing accident reconstruction theory to explain to the jury John's injuries and the damage to the taillight and all the other aspects, such as where the cocktail glass was found, where the straw was found, where pieces of clothing were found, like John's shoe and things like that. They have to be able to explain that in a way that is convincing to people, to the jury. And if they can't do that, there's probably going to be more than enough reasonable doubt. Now, I have no idea, no idea. I never have been given even a hint of what that theory is. I only know that they have a theory, and the accident reconstruction team did their work, did their job, and you're going to see that work at the trial. But whether it's convincing enough, we don't know, right? According to Alan Jackson again, who is a magician with words, the feds hired an independent accident reconstructionist, and that again, we got to be so tricky that he's going to take one isolated sentence out of the report that suits his purpose, but that supposedly this independent expert couldn't make sense of the injuries and the damage to the car. So we'll see, right? And it does have to be explained. Now, what happened there has always been a focus of mine and a fascination of mine since the summer, trying to understand. Strange things happened in pedestrian accidents. You have a 2-ton vehicle traveling at high speed, and things will happen that you would never expect. I recently posted an image and a video. This teenage girl that was in a car accident that I think was going only 25 or 30 miles an hour. It spun out of control, rammed into a utility pole, and threw her so high in the air. I don't know the exact type, but it looks like it's about a 40-foot electric wire, and she's hanging from that alive. Her arm had been severed and was held there by skin, and eventually, after she did survive, she was up there for hours before they were able to. Fire department was able to turn off power and get her down. She did survive. She did lose a leg because of it, but her arm, they were able to save the arm. So it's just amazing that this teenage girl was thrown that high from a relatively low speed accident. There's just a lot of power that goes on in these things. And that's why there are experts that study this. We're not experts. And your average cop is not an expert either. It's unless you've worked on these kind of cases and have studied this and have developed an expertise, we're all amateurs, including police, including state police detectives, like say Procter and Buchanan. They're not trained in this. So you have experts that they're accident reconstructionists that are trained in it, right? So we'll have to see what their explanation is. How did John get a horizontal 2-inch gash on the back of his head that crushed bones in his skull? Was that from the car? Or was that did he hit his head on something? And looking into this, I still have not been able to find out, and I've been looking harder lately, exactly where John ended up. We're told 12 feet. I've also heard 8 to 12 feet. And when you look at the lawn there's the street, there is a curb, there's no sidewalk, there's an area of grass after the curb. But then you have a divided area behind that few feet of grass that comes from the curb. First, you have the yard, and that's grass. But then you have this very wide mulchy area that's between the properties. And in that mulchy area, you have some boulders and you have trees and bushes. We know John was found. So that's that area is the dividing line between the properties. We don't know now. The area, the mulchy area, is fairly wide. Was John found in that mulchy area, or was he found on the grass? We don't know. The fire hydrant is the closest to the property line. That's also the closest to the street. And as you're walking towards the driveway, a little bit set back, a little bit further forward and set further back is an electrical outlet. And I know some people believe John could have hit his head on that. And then further, a little further down and even more further back is the flagpole. So I think it's also possible that the investigators may not know exactly where John was found because John was alive when the first responders got there. There was a couple inches of snow covering everything, so it might not be that easy looking to like if you're one of the witnesses to know where the grass started and where the mulch started. Um, and then you had the CPD. Now, it was I have seen it, I believe, written in the charging document that the grass, and I think that was the word used, around John's body, there was no snow because his body was warm enough to prevent the snow from accumulating there. Um, while that's described as grass, I'm not sure how accurate it is. It's possible that he was on the mulch, right? Because I don't know. And then it snowed. By the time the state police CERT team was there to do the professional investigation that they are trained to do, there was, I don't know, at least 12 inches of snow. I think ultimately a couple of feet of snow fell. So there was a lot of snow there. So was it did they even mark off exactly where John's body was found? Did the Canton, because it would have required the Canton police to mark that off in some way. Did they? I don't know. I don't know if they're trained to do that. They're root cops. They're not trained in those kind of investigations. So it's possible they didn't, right? If they didn't mark it off, is there a way you could find out later? For instance, by digging down and finding blood evidence. Did they do that? I don't know. Are there ways you could find out the exact location from looking at the dash cam footage? Hopefully, I don't know. So we don't really know if they have the exact precise location that John was found, and that could make a difference in trying to figure out the injury to his head. It would make a difference on all aspects of the accident reconstruction. So hopefully they did get that. I have to think that they probably did, but I really don't know. And so it's hard for us on the outside, being amateurs, trying to figure this out. It's hard enough for us anyways because we're amateurs, but then we don't even have all the information. So is it possible that John was hit in the front? Now, a 2-ton vehicle striking a human being at 23 miles an hour is going to send that body very far. It's going to do a lot of damage, right? Is that damage visible on the body? We know that there's a description in the charging document that there was traumatic injury to the pancreas, and I think one of the other organs in there. So could that be from the vehicle? We don't have the medical examiner's report. We'll have that at trial. I think it's like 100 pages long. So maybe there'll be evidence of broken bones somewhere. I don't know. I really have no idea. So we'll see that over time. For now, we're left to kind of speculate. Did that strike him there and push him back, and then he hit his head on the electrical box, as some people think, or on a rock? It doesn't have to be a big rock. It could be a palm-sized rock could do it, and or maybe even could the frozen ground have been enough? I don't know. It seems to me there must have been some kind of object, and I don't think it could have been just frozen ground, but it wouldn't have to be a very big rock. And is that where he found? Is that where John, after we'll have to hear the testimony from the medical experts as to whether that injury to his head was enough to cause him to immediately lose consciousness and never come back and never wake up. So that would mean, well, that would mean either he hit his head and that's where he ended up, or if that's not the case, then that would mean the vehicle somehow hit his head and sent him back that way. So that's another theory. I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert on that kind of thing. Is it possible that he was bending down to pick something up and the vehicle struck him? The injury is on the back, but close to the top of the head. So he wouldn't have to be bending down that far. Is that possible? I don't know. It's a theory that you're throwing out there, and I would have guessed that a woman could be thrown from a relatively low car accident, up onto 40 feet up onto utility wire. I never would have thought that'd be possible. But but that's why, again, we don't know how these things work and we're amateurs. So it'll depend on what the theory is and whether it's presented to the jury and whether it's convincing. I also, let me just check and see if Hillbilly is still here. Hillbilly, are you still watching? So Hillbilly did a video for Heels in the Air's channel, and I thought it was very good. It really pointed out with a lot of clarity, more clarity than I've seen anywhere else, how that piece was missing, and it's visible on the driveway video. So if he's here, I'm going to play it. But the other option was if him and Heels want to come on the channel some other time and point it out, we can do that. I'll see if he's still here and he wants to check in. I'm going to line up the video just in case he wants to give me the okay to go through with this. Let me just line it up in case we want to look at it. But again, good morning, guys. Rainy day, so hopefully, at least if you're listening here in Massachusetts, hopefully you guys love a rainy day. All right. Lining up the video. All right, is Hillbilly still here? So Hillbilly, do you want me to go over the video now? I can play. Okay, so let's go over it right now. And he's still welcome to come on the show and discuss it in his own words later on. Oh, yeah.
Basically, if you look at this other video I have, when she backs in to John's car, there's a second or two where she does not apply the brakes. You can see her backing in, hits the car, and
which is what you said, right?
Yeah,
She
yeah,
does or doesn't.
yeah. She does. She does bump that vehicle, in my opinion. You can see it move.
But does she apply the brakes or not? She does.
Yeah, she applies the brakes once she hits it.
and there's like a second. Then she applies the brake. The funny thing is, the force comes back from John's car back into her car, so that energy goes back into the taillight. Okay, so you get 6,500.
I just want to pause for a second to address some people in chat. JDams, do me a favor and ease up on the caps. So you're welcome to argue whatever you want, civilly, respectfully. Just ease up on the caps. That's kind of a pet peeve of mine. People that come in and try to scream, it's not necessary. The vehicle, he says that the vehicle has been disproved by federal investigators, but he's still in denial. Nobody has seen that report. So it's not rational to make that claim. You can make the claim that Alan Jackson, the defense attorney, has said, as I've said here, that the feds hired an independent investigator, and so this investigator supposedly could not match the injuries to the damage on the car. But we have not seen that report. So there's no way we can question it. Not only that, we don't know anything about the person who made the report. And not only that, we don't even know if Alan Jackson has given us an accurate description of the conclusions of that report. And it's not rational to think that Alan Jackson is automatically telling the truth because he's been caught numerous times. In fact, it's a regular part of his shtick to twist words in a way that creates really what is a falsehood, such as the non-human hair. There's no non-human hair. There was insufficient DNA found in the sample, and that's what the lab said. And so they said no human DNA detected, which is to mean, no, it said not enough, I don't forget exactly, it said no human DNA, it said not enough human DNA detected. But what they were basically saying was they were given, if you look closely at the report, just too small a piece that didn't have enough DNA in it. No one is actually saying that that they found a non-human hair, like some artificial hair. No, that's not what they were saying. And Alan Jackson knows that, but he knows there are people are easily fooled, and including Aiden, who either is easily fooled or has no problem fooling you. Same thing with the library gap. There's no gap in the library video. No one went in and deleted anything. The camera, this is not 1984, all right? The camera is motion triggered, just like the ring system on your door. And nothing triggered a video between 12:37 and 12:39. That's where they say there's a gap. Nothing triggered that because Karen didn't drive home that way. All right. So he's willing to trick you guys, and some people are willing to fall for it because they want to. So let's just go back to this video. But please say what you want, but no caps.
Going into it's crazy stuff because I had an accident investigation school.
Yeah.
And it's Newton's third law. And I was told by a person back channel of Twitter, and how it's true. The law, the energy, once John's car stopped Karen's SUV, that energy came back. And that's how she cracked it. In between the red, there's a white part. That's actually the blinker and the hazard lights. Okay. And that's where the crack happened.
It basically that taillight housing covers the side and the back of the quarter panel of the car. It's all one piece that slides in the back of the car. You can see that in those photos I sent you from the Canton Police Department impound lot.
Okay.
That one photo that's on there that's very clear. You'll see that you can see the whole light that's completely broken out. That's when they say they tampered with it.
You're saying it covered right there, right?
Now, so here's the photo here. She has a little cursor going here. Hopefully it's coming through on the screen, but keep in mind, so you look at that red piece that's almost a square-like shape from this angle that's on the top right. And you can see where the piece is broken off. Now, remember that because you're going to see it later in the video.
Yeah, it went all the way to it met that other piece
to the end.
There. Yeah,
right there?
You see that little square section right there?
Right here?
Yeah, that's the backup lights.
And the part that she's pointing at now is kind of it's on the left part of this where it's clear. Keep in mind, there is no red taillight piece to cover that. That part of the taillight is clear even when it's intact.
That section would be clear.
Okay. So
the rest of it would be
the big piece that's missing that they found, and I've also seen other pictures that show it matches up perfectly to this. That's in the middle, and it looks kind of like a shoe or a boot. That's the piece they found.
Yeah, that would all be red.
Oh. So that's where the 36 or 37 pieces came from.
Yeah.
I thought it only covered here.
No, it's the whole, all of that. It's basically all of that.
So you can see it right there. That part is clear.
You see that red part right there at the top, that jagged piece right there?
Here.
Now compare that to the screenshot from the video. That's that jagged piece hanging down, but you're looking down at it, so it looks a little different in shape.
Like the taillight for me, and people know. People say, "Sean, get off the taillight, get off the taillight." No, I was in this guy's live. He's in Wales. I kind of left everything on the field in his stream, and I went totally at this taillight. And I don't need to show any pictures. It's clear as daylight. And I made one challenge, but we'll get to that. So,
all right.
He doesn't need to show any pictures.
He knows everything.
Sure. You want to pull up the video? Want me to pull up the video for us?
I think it's there, right? I mean, do you have it? I mean, there it is. Now, do I get the chance to?
You have the controls now.
Oh, I do.
Watch her wheel turn in this video right here.
Here we go.
Her wheel is turning right now.
I've never seen it turn. I've tried so hard.
It's turning right now.
All right. So right there, he hit and then a split second later, the brakes go on, and you can't see it clearly from this angle. When you do bring it in to zoom in, it shows how the energy is flowed. Okay, and so okay, now I don't know if we can zoom in. So this is what I've worked on.
You can zoom in like on your end if you can zoom it a little bit. Let's see.
Really, I got these stupid.
How's that? Okay.
Yeah, that's great. It doesn't really matter. So if you look, so I started looking. I said, wait a minute, this is crazy. That right side is pretty much intact. Right? We know Jen had talked about the taillight being cracked, right?
The spotlight from the camera. That's a ring. That's a ring spotlight. It has a spotlight on it, and the light is shining down and shining onto the silver housing, and you can see that little red jagged mark. Piece of
It's
plastic
right
hanging
there.
at the top.
Oh my God, yeah. It's right there. That's the red.
That housing is completely busted right there.
This,
And you see there's no.
Now it seems to me, and they're just stay tuned. They're going to get a closer up video on this. It gets much clearer. But I just want to stop that they pointed out that Karen turning the wheel, possibly as though I think they're implying that she was deliberately hitting the SUV. And I've talked to another friend of mine who is in federal law enforcement, or I'm retired from federal law enforcement. And that was his first reaction to this back in June, whenever this first came out. And he's like, oh, yeah, she's totally doing that on purpose. Now, I don't know. Who really knows? Was she, I think Heels made a really good point that you're turning the wheel as you come out of the garage and you're preparing to turn up the other way. So you usually be turning right as you get outside the door, but Karen seemed to be turning here late in the game. So it is possible that she backed into that on purpose to cover up the damage. But I guess it's really difficult to know.
There's no red plastic laying behind that vehicle. There's nothing on top of the snow.
Nope. I have not until you just pointed that out to me. Notice that jagged is exactly right there.
You'll see it even more here in a minute when she pulls forward.
But here's the killer. We know Proctor in his affidavit never used the word crack. What he used was
no, it's not. Running Bear says the light is broken inward. It's gone. It's right there. It's gone.
You'll see here in a minute. It's completely missing from the housing. It's all busted out.
He saw this car the way it was, and he said, upon seeing the vehicle, he noticed that the right side, so right around there, right there, is what he's talking about. And he said, it's shattered with a large chunk missing.
Shattered.
I said, well, shattered. I said, that's not shattered. So we'll go a little further here. Okay, so it's not really demonstrative there, but there is a little bit of space.
So
my video will show a little different than this right here. She went past it. I think it's on purpose too.
I think he's the one controlling it.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get this thing.
Yeah, he's controlling it.
All right, see the dark area right there.
Yep.
Now, right now she has no brakes on, but when she gets to the end of the driveway, see now the whole thing lights up, which means had that taillight been shattered and a large chunk missing, it would have been like a moonbeam. It would have been all white because
Let me correct him.
Right. And I said, wait a minute, we got something here. So
here's something people don't know about ring cameras. The ring spotlight cameras, the colored version, the colored camera, the color night vision has a processor in it that artificially adds the color. So it's probably going to bleed where that light is red. It's probably going to bleed a little bit that into pink, and we'll see that in my video that I sent you.
And this is a really interesting point that, again, this is why you need experts in here. So what Sean is saying is that if the taillight is missing pieces right there, and it's not a huge piece missing from this distance, right? But there still should be enough that underneath is the clear taillight. And so I think what Sean is saying is that we should see white, clear light here somewhere in the middle of that red. Okay. And that's not unreasonable to speculate that. Okay. But we'll go a little bit further along here. And I don't know to what extent that's true what Hillbilly is saying, but that is true. These videos that we get through any of these digital devices is all processed. So it does seem reasonable to me that there's a level when some video that's processed, there's a level of algorithm that's determining what's going on in it to try to make sense of the picture, very much as our brains do with actual visual stuff material that comes into them.
you got to remember that these night vision ring cameras, they artificially add the color in.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's playing with the color of the light. I suspect, my opinion.
Okay. And is that her brake light?
Yeah,
in
it's
the
her
back-
brake light. Before she hits her brake light, you can see that there's clearly a light out in the tail light.
in the tail light. But now,
Watch when she's pulling out of the driveway. You can see her hand on the wheel of the car. She's turning the wheel right when she gets up to John's car, and she turns right into the car.
okay.
You can see it on the front of the car, and you can see her hand on the wheel turning it.
Okay. Let me put it in slow motion. Okay, here we go.
Turning right there.
So it is kind of interesting that she turns late, but she must, but in her defense, I would say she must know that the car is there and she's drunk. So I don't know. I don't think it's conclusive, but it's
Yep.
interesting.
Yep.
And she hits the
She
car
turns
very,
right
very,
into it.
very, very soft.
Uh-huh.
She hits the car, only taps it very softly.
And why wouldn't she turn before that? I mean, you would pull up, pull back. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
wouldn't. Okay, tell me when to stop it.
I put it in. I slow the video down here
Oh,
so
you
you
did
can
it?
see.
It's going. So I've got it slowed down even more.
The ring spotlight camera is shining on the silver light right there, the silver section of the housing.
Right here.
Yeah, that's where it's shining, on the silver section of the housing.
Okay.
You can see it's all busted out right there with that red jagged section at the top.
Right there.
That's giving the pink light out right there. There's a bulb underneath that, or
Okay,
near
so
that.
this part wasn't covered in. Oops.
You'll see it again here in a minute. I'll zoom in on it.
What is that? Like the
That's where it's busted out. That's where
reflector
it's missing all the red lens right there.
right there? That looks too round.
Yeah, I think that's with the video being
okay.
cropped in on. I pulled this from Court TV.
Okay. Okay, now this is all you. I didn't
Yeah.
rewind.
You see the red jagged section hanging down.
Yep. Right there.
Yep.
And
see
this
that
right
the
here is
light,
all busted out.
the bulb that's in there is causing that pink light to come out.
And this, you're saying, was covered
That
with.
should all be red right there.
Is that super thin, the red covering? Because it
Yeah,
looks
they're not.
really thin.
I owned a Lexus back in 2001, and I actually took the taillights apart in it, and they were really thin, but I don't know about nowadays.
But just the cover, the red covering, right?
Yeah, it's the taillight lens. Yeah,
Because that looks
you can
so thin.
you can see it's compared right to the jagged section
Yep.
right there.
Yep.
That's the case right there. I mean, there's no conspiracy if that light is busted out, which it is. I mean, you can clearly see.
Yeah, because I didn't notice it overlap right there before.
Right there. I mean, that shows it right there.
I mean, that piece really does look like
It
there's a
should have
missing
been.
piece, and it's
Uh-huh.
and if you say it looks almost exactly the same, let's go right back to that a little bit. So if you look at this piece here, and you might say, well, it looks very close to the missing piece, but not exactly. But you have to, but you see how the same overall shape goes beneath it, and then the broken piece that's sticking out. But you have to remember that a tail light is a rounded thing. So the angle is going to make a big difference from what angle you take the photo or the video from. So it's not going to look exactly the same, but it's going to be pretty close. And you could definitely see, looking at this picture here, that there's missing pieces. I think it's beyond dispute that there's missing pieces there. Whether it perfectly matches, I don't know. But let me. I also have another one that I made myself. I've shown you guys this one many times before, but we'll show it again. It's loading up. Give it a second. All right. Oh, I think I got a better one actually. 1 second. Just pull this up for you. So that there is this is important. We've always talked about if there's a spotlight. He said it's attached to the ring. I don't know, but if there's a spotlight on the garage, when we looked at this summer, is this white spot here, is that reflection from the spotlight, right? But what Hillbilly is pointing out here, that I hadn't thought of before, is that yes, it is. However, if you look, that spotlight is also hitting where the red light is still intact. And because the red light is there, it doesn't create that white look. So that spotlight is hitting a piece where the taillight, where the red piece is missing. And that's why it's so clear. And again, from that angle right there, you can really see the missing piece. I mean, it's below the red kind of jagged piece. So I don't know. To me, there's going to be, just remove this. So there's going to be evidence, audio evidence in Karen's word at trial that proves that the taillight was shattered. We don't know. I don't know what time that is, but it's going to be long before the tow. It's going to be when Karen examined the vehicle at the scene. And in her own words, with Yannetti in the room, you're going to hear her describe pieces missing. Okay, so the idea that's at the very least going to narrow it down. So let's say Karen did that examination when she came back with Kerry and Jen. If she did that, so that would have been around 5:30. So if that's the case, then you'd have to show that the tampering was done before 5:30. And if you believe the analysis Nitro has of this image, then it would have to be before 5. Okay, and at that time, the vehicle was locked in John's garage. Or if when Karen inspected that and pulled out the piece, when she found missing pieces at the driveway, if that happened when she came back from the hospital with her dad, I don't know the exact time of that, but let's say that's about 10:30. Then again, that narrows down the time range. So it would have somehow had to have been tampered with before that time, because that's just based on her own words. Okay, even if you don't believe the analysis of this video. So, but that vehicle was in John's garage, except when Karen took it out to go look for John and then to go over to Jen McCabe's house. They drove it back and it was in the garage. There's no evidence the garage was tampered with or broken into. And there was, by 5 o'clock, you can see snow in the driveway. There's no footsteps there. No one's been walking around there. And the snow continued to fall all morning. And by, say, 6:30, as the John's family became aware of the tragedy and the niece was awake and in the house and wondering what happened, the family comes over. And so you have this really tragic scene where the family is there all day. So, so it's hard to imagine that somebody broke into the garage at say 9:30 or 9 o'clock while the family's there and left no signs of damage on the garage, left no footprints that anybody noticed or anything like that. It's just impossible. There was no chance to tamper with this vehicle. I am not on the state police's side. Okay? I'm on the side of the evidence. I'm on the side of logic. I'm on the side of critical thinking. And there was no opportunity to tamper with the vehicle, and there was no opportunity to plant evidence. So Sean is under a different version here. He's in both as Law and Order, but I'm not deflecting anything. It's you can look at this. There's no opportunity to do it. So it just at some point it is what it is. You know, if you still believe the feds are coming down on and the latest versions of stealth helicopters to land in Canton and arrest everybody, including the judge. I mean, at some point, don't you give up the fantasy at some point? I guess you can't because you've attached, whether you're Aiden or whether you're the Glare, but certainly Aiden and Sean or LTL or this Dylan guy, whoever these people are, that if you put too much of your reputation into this thing, then you got egg on your face when it turns out that you were lying to them or you were wrong. In this case here, it's a combination of things. There's a lot of deception that Aiden and Sean have given to people, and there's a lot of really bad analysis. So I don't really understand why anybody would take them seriously after this, which is unfortunate. I didn't want it to see that because I do believe that Aiden's type of journalism is very purposeful and important to have someone that'll cover things that the mainstream media won't cover. And I don't really see anybody else. They're doing it to a certain extent. Howie Carr, but the guy's like in his 80s. So, I mean, to me, it was very important. But how can you have it if the person that's presenting you this stuff just lies to you all the time? And the same thing with Sean. I like Sean personally, and I like the idea of having someone that was going to put together a team of former law enforcement people and speak credibly on these things, but he has no credibility. And I don't say that. It's not part of some feud. It's just important for people to understand that. You're being fed misinformation. And at some point you say, all right, if a guy keeps saying it's going to snow this July and it doesn't, at some point you have to say, all right, maybe I need to check my sources. And it means you also need to look in the mirror too and say, why am I believing something? Why do I continue to believe something when the evidence is so bad and the evidence of their lying and deceiving you is so clear? Then maybe there's some other reason that you want to believe in this or you need to believe in this. Is there some emotional basis for it? Have you been, people feel like this. A lot of people, maybe I think it seems like a lot of people in their 40s and 50s have fallen into this conspiracy. Have things not maybe gone as well in their life? So they tend to feel they project what they see as the injustices of their own life into what they think maybe happened to Karen. And so they say that's why they invest so much emotion into believing this thing. But there's no, someone like Jen Altman, her position over the last few months seems to have evolved to, well, everybody's entitled to a fair trial. Of course, no one is saying that she's not. All right. And everybody's innocent until proven guilty by a grand jury or until they confess. But there are limits. So when you're out there, if you know you're guilty and you're pointing a finger at innocent people, destroying them just so you can get off, no, you're not entitled to do that. You're not entitled to do that. And everybody's just entitled to discuss a case with their opinions. And I'm not trying to suggest any weakening of First Amendment rights. But the people, us, should judge broadcasters that are out there that are deliberately harming other people and smearing them with reckless disregard for the truth. You can't support that. All right. I'm not saying that the state police should go after someone, and I'm not trying to criminalize free speech. The witness intimidation thing is a whole different charge. I don't think there's any question that is something that went on. The rolling rally had nothing to do with First Amendment rights. All right. And much of the other, and some of the other activity involved in this. But going on and blogging on something, I don't think that that's witness intimidation. It might be obnoxious. But ultimately, it shouldn't be the government that defeats that. It should be people. It should be the citizens that stand up and have a sense of decency and a sense of critical thinking and say, no, this is wrong. Going on, smearing people, but smearing women based on their looks every night on your show, it's unacceptable. But again, I'm not saying it should be illegal. It's just the people that watch that are supporting it. They're enabling it, and it has to stop. And the same thing with Sean. Sean doesn't do that. That's not his style, and I will give him credit for that. And I do believe Sean is capable of legitimate, sincere empathy, because there was another, I don't want to get into it, but there was another case where I do believe there's a decent human being in there that wants to do the right thing, but he's gone so far off on the rails on this that he doesn't know how to get out of it. And just mentally, he doesn't know how to get out of it. So he's forced to believe weirder and weirder things. Accusing John's brother of being part of the conspiracy to cover up his death, that's cruel and it's wrong. And it was based on no evidence. It was based on the need. He had to explain how there was no damage to John's vehicle in the driveway from that collision. Now, for me, I always thought, well, there's not necessarily, just because it was a small collision, there isn't necessarily a scratch. I was in a collision like that myself where I did minor damage. Well, see, I did put a dent into my brother-in-law's vehicle, but the vehicle I was driving was unscratched. And so sometimes these low-speed collisions can do stuff like that. But Sean didn't believe in that. So he believed the only logical explanation was that the conspirators had stolen John's vehicle that day from the driveway, taken it to an auto body shop, and buffed out any scratches or any damage. And I asked him, how is that possible with the grieving family all inside the house and a blizzard going on that nobody notices the vehicle is missing? And he came back with the Paul theory. There's no evidence for it. He doesn't provide any evidence. It's the necessity of having, in his mind, of having that piece. It had to be somebody from the family. Otherwise, the family would say, oh, what happened to John's car? So it had to be someone from the family that said, oh, I'm going to take this car out and go get cigarettes or something. And they come back 2 hours later with everything fixed. There's no evidence for that. And there never will be, because it didn't happen. It's just something that's made necessary in order to make yet another absurd part of this theory work. And that's what you run into this case. And almost every angle is some absurdity. The idea, it begins in absurdity. The idea that people killed John inside their own home, or left him near dead, left him alive, clinging to life in the home for several hours, and then carried him out into their own yard to drop him on top of his own phone. That's absurd. That's absurd. And I think most normal, sane people understand this, but the people that don't understand it are the ones that mostly just have a need to believe in this case for some reason. And we need to stop that. We need to do better as people. We need to be better critical thinkers. We need to weigh evidence more carefully. And if we can't weigh evidence carefully, then wait for the trial. Wait for the trial. But when you see people that are being accused of horrendous crimes, and yet there's no evidence, decent people will hesitate at that. And they'll say, oh, even people that think they were presented this in a way that made them think there was something odd going on here, but their decency would make them hesitate to publicly say that innocent people, of which there's no evidence against, took part in a conspiracy to murder their friends and to cover it up. To not do that, to be out there publicly stating that based on no evidence, it's not a good sign. It's a sign of indecency. Good people don't do that. They don't. So anyways, this was an impromptu stream, and I wanted to go over Turtle Boy's post just to recap that part of it if you're jumping in late. He's posted this morning that Auntie Bev Canone, the judge, has confirmed that 227 search for how long to die in the cold is true? No. And I think he's probably smart enough to know that he's not telling you the truth on that. But who knows? No. The Bev would not, Auntie Bev would not make a decision on that one way or another. That's not her job. Okay. If you, she basically is saying you have competing experts on both sides and they'll have it out at trial and the jury will decide whether or not that search took place. What she was saying was very simple. The state had to show, I'm sorry, the defendant had to prove to get this case dismissed that the grand jury was presented with false material or was not given exculpatory material in a way that would have potentially changed their decision. And they're saying that the state had evidence for 227 search of how long to die in the cold, and they didn't give it to that grand jury. And that's the reason why the indictment should be overturned. That's silly. Alan Jackson knew it was silly. He didn't expect it to work. What Bev is pointing out is that it was impossible for the state to have a 2023 version of the Celebrite software in 2022. Just like you now cannot have on your phone a 2025 version of Apple. It hasn't been written yet. It hasn't been put out yet. Okay. The state was using the latest version of the Celebrite software in 2022 before the grand jury, and that version did not turn up any kind of a weird timestamp like that. Now, for some reason, the updated version a year later did turn that up. And what has to be determined by the experts is whether that timestamp was accurate. And the creator of that software, the writer of that software for Celebrite, a senior data analyst, forensic data analyst, who developed the software, has said it's not accurate. And he explained why there are circumstances when the timestamp is not accurate. He's going to testify for the prosecution. Weirdly, people in the part of Free Cameron Read Conspiracy keep trying to say, well, this expert's actually going to testify for the defense. I don't get it. This is why I say there's kind of a zombie logic thing going on here. If you really think that the state is bringing in an expert to testify for the defense, maybe you should stick to sports, because it's not sensible. So that's where we're at. The judge has not made any determination. She wouldn't be qualified to make a determination on that. And that's not at all what she said in her reply to the motions, in her denying it. What all she's saying is that there was nothing the state had, even if that search on the 2023 version of the software turns out to be accurate, even if it turned out to be accurate, it's not enough to overturn. It wouldn't impact the decision of the grand jury because they couldn't have had it in 2022. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. So look carefully to what people that are regularly deceiving you. If you go onto a car lot, a used car lot, and someone is going to try to lie, first of all, you should have your guard up that they're going to try to tell you some bullshit about the cars. All right. And then if you go on there and you buy a car and it turns out they did bullshit you, are you going to keep going on that lot and keep taking everything that same salesman says at face value? No, you're not. And that's why if you're paying close attention to this case, you wouldn't take anything seriously that Aiden says or that Sean says. And most of the other grifters out there don't even look at it as deeply as these guys. So the grifter, LTL seems like a nice guy, but he's not asking any questions on this. The young jellyfish there, he's terrified of Aiden. He's terrified of him. He would never, even if a question popped into his head, if it might offend Aiden, he wouldn't ask it. So look to your sources, give it some thought, weigh whether they're telling you the truth, and this whole thing is going to be over very soon.